And here we are at Quick Fix Golf, another Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. If you want to join us, you just go to quickfixgolf.com and look for golf webinars under golf lesson menu. And you'll see we have all kinds of great guests, like we have one tonight with Eric Alpenfels. Is that how you say it, Eric? Alpenfels?
Yes, sir. Yep.
And Eric is the director of instruction at the Pinehurst, which is probably one of the most prestigious golf addresses on the planet. And let me see. He leads the Pinehurst Golf Academy. And he's a Class A PGA member, director of construction.
He's a master.
He's a master professional. Holy cow! You got all those 4 stars or something around the.
Yep.
I'm surprised they haven't thrown me out.
That's a matter of time.
And he's actively involved in daily instruction. You run the whole. It's quite a golf academy you have there, from what I see on the site. And he's a top 100 teachers in America, and a Golf Digest is one of the leading 50 greatest teachers. And Eric, welcome to the gang.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you putting me on.
Thanks to Darren. Darren got you to come on, and we wanted to ask you about some of the things that my real interest was how you prepared to go out to play golf, because I wrote a report on something like that, and evidently your thoughts are somewhat similar to mine. But why don't we start off with this instinct putting that you're promoting?
Sure. Well, it's a study that we did years ago for Golf Magazine. Actually, the concept of the study was the idea from Lauren Anderson, who was the editor at the time, one of the editors of Golf Magazine. And he had been hearing people talk about how they were putting better if they were looking at the hole. And in some cases, it was with people that had the yips and things like that. So my research partner, a guy named Dr. Bob Christina, who's in Greensboro, he and I went out and we did a study, and we were very surprised by the findings that when we had people practice their distance control by looking at the hole, after a set number of putts, we tested them, and it was determined by their success that if they practiced looking at the hole compared to the group that looked at the golf ball like usual with a structured practice routine, and by structured mean just that they followed, they went from a 33-footer to an 18-footer. They bounced back and forth in this order of putts, that they were more effective at distance control at the end of the practice session than the other group. And that led us to do more research on the topic, and we eventually wrote a book called Instinct Putting, and we are currently revisiting that topic and the original studies and adding more information to it. There's been a lot of folks who have incorporated it. There's been a few more studies as well, and so we're actually updating the book right now, and it'll be coming out here shortly.
So is there something more to it than just looking at the hole, or what?
Well, a lot of the book, the time with the book is divvied into various portions. One, certainly the importance of green reading, certainly technique. It's important, proper setup and all that stuff. But the gist of the book is that you can run through a test and determine if instinct putting would be a good solution for your distance control and your putting overall. And so we just have, again, gone down the road a little bit further with some of the research that other folks have done in other disciplines that would indicate that it's not a bad idea.
Where can these folks buy the book?
Well, right now it's I guess probably the initial run was done 10 years ago, so I guess probably anymore you can find it on Amazon or something like that, just in the used book department. But at some point here in the near future, we're going to put it out as an ebook, and people will have access to it that way. But again, the new version will simply be an updated. We'll add to it what we've learned in the last 10 years from the initial study.
Well, it makes sense to me, because if you're playing horseshoes, you're looking at the pole where you're throwing the horseshoe. If we were pitching quarters on the back of the school, you probably didn't do that because you didn't grow up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood like me. You looked at the wall as you were throwing the quarter. I mean, you didn't look down.
Sure. In fact, when we first looked at the data, two things happened. One is that the findings were so surprising to me that I thought I had somehow inputted the information incorrectly, and I had somebody else follow up with what I did just to cross-reference me, and then there were no mistakes made. It was just such a surprising finding. Then we reached out to folks that do research in eye movement patterns and study athletes in other disciplines, and they all said the same thing. it makes a lot of sense. Why would you be surprised? And it was just counterintuitive to me that, I'd always been told, keep your head down to where you hear the ball go in a hole, kind of thing. Keep your eyes on the ball or where the ball was, and then when you hear the ball fall into the cup, that's when you look up. So it was just kind of an opposite thing that I'd ever heard.
Darren?
Yeah, I can't say that I actually have ever tried that. I do have a question about kind of the what you're inferring here, Eric, is about distance yips, directional yips. Have you guys done any kind of studies on that? I mean, is that what I'm hearing?
In this case, the intent of the study was to determine if looking at the hole or the starting direction of the putt would be beneficial to somebody's overall distance control. The follow-up to that would be that it seems to have helped people with the face being more square at impact as well. Because when we did the study, we were just measuring the outcome, how close the ball was to the hole. Right. On a 33-footer or a 45-footer and the various distance we were testing. And when the golfer looked at the hole when they practiced, they were better at adapting to the changes in distance needed between the putts. And so, it's having said that, at the same time, what we did find is that the dispersion pattern right or left was also closer as well. So overall, not only short to long, but right to left, it was more effective. So it did have an influence on the face.
What I've always done with both my chipping and long putts is my eyes follow the ball. Mm-hmm. So I'm not looking at the hole and I'm not looking down at the, I might have the putter and I'm looking at the center of gravity of the putter and I just want to hit it. And as soon as I make contact with the ball, my eyes just go with the ball because I want to watch it roll. So I'm building a database in my brain as to, how much break and how fast. And
sure. And a lot of golfers miss that first 5 or 6 feet of the putt because they're so focused on keeping their eyes where the ball was. So, yeah, I agree for sure. I think that's the reason sometimes people misread putts is that they don't really take into consideration the first 10 feet of the putt because they don't ever see the ball roll that distance.
Yeah, I could never, trying to keep your head down on a 4-foot putt. Also, I mean, to me, it's like trying not to open up your presents before your parents come down at Christmas. You want to see what the hell happened. I've never had a problem with looking up. I just do it. I don't care.
It was just an interesting study that again was just to one of the editors of Golf Magazine, like I said, was interested in the topic because he had heard people talking about it, and we were very surprised by the findings. At least I was, for sure.
So they can go to Amazon. They can buy the book.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, they can get on Amazon and find a copy of it, I'm sure, without much trouble. And then again, like I said, we're working on the rewrite of it right now, and our goal would be to eventually get it out in an ebook form.
Well, what I'm interested in is what Darren was telling me about you with the practice. I don't know what else to call it, but practice procedures. Yeah. Because I'm a stickler on if I've got a 10 o'clock starting time, I'm going to be at the golf course at 8. And I go different than most people do. I start at 4 foot, then I go to 40 foot, then I chip. Usually don't hit any bunker shots, but I might hit a couple. And I go to the range last, and the last thing I hit is my driver, and then go right to the tee and hit it.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Yeah, as far as a lot of our students in our golf schools, when we talk to them about how they warm up. Now we're talking specifically warming up before you go play, more so than a practice session.
Right. Exactly.
But if you were, whatever the time frame is, I think it's fine. But the idea would be that you would do your short game first off, whatever order is your preference. And the idea of working on your putting first to get a feel for the greens, that makes sense because that would give you good feedback for your chipping and pitching. And if you have time to hit a couple bunker shots, I'm with you. I always like to hit a couple just to get the feel of the sand. So that makes sense. And then from there, the interesting thing is that research would show that if you were to hit full shots and then go putt for 10 minutes, 15 minutes before you tee off, you will have lost some of your range of motion and your flexibility just by standing over the ball and not moving. And so a lot of our students will say, I hit balls before I go play. I putt, and then it takes me 3 holes to warm up. What's going on? Well, the issue is that they're putting for such an extended amount of time before they tee off that they've lost all their range of motion and flexibility. It's not that they don't get it back. It just takes a few more swings. And so I always recommend to people that if you're going to hit balls first and then end up by the putting green, which makes sense because that's usually where the putting surface is. It's by the first hole, by the first tee. Just make sure you make a flurry of rehearsal swings just to get loosened back up, just because you will have lost some of your range of motion.
That's where I think golf courses are made improperly. I think the putting green shouldn't be, they're set up that way where, and I understand the range makes more noise, and you don't want that noise near the first tee. Yep. But I start off with the 4-foot putt, and I tell people if I had to stay there for the whole 2 hours and roll 4-footers before I played, I'd do it because I'm not going on the golf course if I can't get the freaking ball in the hole from 4 feet. I mean, I've got to be able to close the sail, and I've got to be able to make that 4-foot putt. Once I'm comfortable and I know that's working, then I go to the 40-footer. I don't deal with 12-foot putts. Who cares? I'm trying to roll at the right distance. I mean, is that sort of what your studies have shown, or?
Well, no, I'm not too sure about that. As far as the, I'm not aware of any studies that would say it's better to do 4-footers than the 12-footers. It certainly makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of things in golf that make sense, and that would be one of them. I mean, it's gonna be more costly to you if you start missing a bunch of 4-footers and 5-footers than it will be missing 12-footers, because statistically you don't make as many 12-footers. So
right.
That would be there. I think at some point, somewhere along the line, I read that when you get to about 20 feet, you've got most of the students I deal with have a greater chance of 3-putting 20 feet than they do of making it. So at some point, everything becomes a lag putt anyway, trying to get down to 2. So that would make sense. But I definitely suggest to people that they warm up the full swing last prior to going to the first tee, and then just be ready to go.
Now, what about practice procedures?
Well, tell me what you mean by procedures.
For instance, what I tell folks, I say, when you go out, of course, this is the warm-up. I shouldn't say that. Let's say even a practice session. If I've got a certain drill assigned, and let's say I'm an over-the-top kind of swinger, and I've assigned the guy a stick drill to go outside the stick and inside the stick to invert the path so that the path comes down more shallow. I would tell him, say, the first thing you do before you even practice anything, you do the drill and talk to the swing fault and let him know that you know who he is, you know what he can do to you, and he's not going to get away with it today. And you hammer that swing fault before you just start hitting balls.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's, there's 3 steps to the process. And I think what you're describing right there is the cognitive stage of motor learning, where you basically have to figure out what are you trying to do or what are you working on. So rehearsal swings or the drill, before you ever hit a golf ball, that would make a lot of sense from that 3-step process. The first stage being the cognitive stage of it, doing some rehearsal swings, just rehearsing, hey, that's what I'm trying to do. And so having the shaft in the ground or whatever you're working on, feet together drill, whatever it might be, you make sure that you have a good sense in your head about what you're going to be working on when you're hitting golf balls. So that's for sure happening. That's absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Versus just whacking a bunch of golf balls.
And I got the water. Go ahead, Darren. You got anything?
Yeah, no. I love where we're going with this, and I love the 3 stages as Eric's talking about, and I talk about this all the time with, spending so much time with Michael Breed. We talk about 5 different stages, being 1, identifying what you need to do, making the swing without a ball, then adding the target, then adding the golf course, then adding the golf course with pressure. So there's different procedures or stages that at least I see that I like to work with my students, and I love the thought process that Eric has with that. What do you think about that, Eric, kind of that process of the 5 stages?
Well, yeah, now you're talking in terms of a skill practice environment shifting to a transfer practice, which makes
exactly.
My point of the 3 steps to making a swing change, there's 3 stages of motor learning. There's the cognitive stage, there's the intermediate stage, and there's the autonomous. And all of our students want to get to the autonomous stage where they don't have to think about it anymore. They can just stand up and hit the golf ball with whatever technique they're working on. The trouble is, you've got 3 stages to it. You don't get to the autonomous stage without going through the cognitive and the intermediate. So for sure, though, what you're talking about right there in my mind is skill practice shifting into transfer practice and preparing for the golf course. Without question, you've got to do that. If you don't practice in a transfer mode at some point, it's going to be very challenging to get to the golf course without that step. I mean, we did a study on it years ago.
There's the transfer, there's the shift, and what's before the shift? It's just the skill stage.
Well, we typically call it skill practice. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So an example of skill practice, by definition, skill practice is practicing outside the field of play. So you're on a driving range, you're hitting golf balls, you're hitting 6 irons after 6 irons, and all you're doing is just working on your technique. That's skill practice. Transfer practice is practicing, again, by definition, transfer practice is practicing in the field of play. So that would be what you're talking about, hitting balls on the range, visualizing a green, a shot to an imaginary flag, trying to prepare yourself for the golf course environment. So yeah, that makes sense. And what's surprising is how few of our students that we meet for the first time in our golf school, they're predisposed about 11% of the time practicing on the range in a transfer practice environment. 89% of the time they're hitting balls on the range in a skill practice environment. Trouble is, that's a long step to the golf course.
Yeah, we have a workshop every Friday, what we call monitored practice, and half of the workshop is talking about how you practice, and that's what we talk about, the skill set, and then how you take it to the course. Varying the targets, varying the clubs that you can use. And I love your concept of playing 3 holes before you get out there. And that's where most people, they get out there at the 4th, 5th hole, then they're warmed up.
Yeah. Well, it's we did a study a few years ago at Methodist University, which you're familiar with, where we took a group of golfers and we had one group practice in a skill set environment where all they did was work on their technique, and we gave them very specific parameters of what we were looking for improvement-wise. And then the second group, we actually had them practice in a transfer environment where they had fairways to hit at, had targets, they scored themselves. They're still on the driving range, by the way, but they're practicing in a way that mimics the golf course and performance on the golf course. And basically after 3 days, that group was able to carry the changes they made on the range to the golf course, where the group that all they did was practice on the range and hit balls and work on their technique in that skill environment. They went right back to day 1 performance out on the golf course. So the 3 days of practice didn't do them any good.
The story I love to tell, Eric, is when Nick Faldo beat Greg Norman in the Masters. Are you familiar with that story about how Faldo warmed up that morning?
No, I'm not, no.
So Faldo played the golf course on the range before he went out, and I think he shot, maybe it was 66 or whatever, and Norman shot that horrific 78. But that's one of the things that he did. He played the golf course on the range before he went out there, and he attributes that to why he shot such a good round in that 4th round, and it makes sense, doesn't it?
Sure, because he's preparing for the golf course, and that's where the results are. So it absolutely makes sense. It would make more sense that he did that rather than, no, I hit 56 irons in a row on the range just working on my technique. At that, for sure. I mean, research would support what he did across the board. Every sport in the world has research on that idea.
Well, that's what Hogan used to do.
Oh, no.
As far as skill practice or transfer practice?
Hogan used to always play. He was a proponent of playing the whole golf course right on the range, but you can burn yourself out too. I mean, I think it's better to play the first 3 or 4 holes and get them out of your system. That's the way I look at it. Gives me a chance to play those holes and screw them up on the driving range. So then I say, well, okay, now I know I'm going to play well on the golf course. I mean,
you know where it's going. Yeah, no. As far as I think I would be surprised if there's a tour player that didn't do transfer practice on the range. In fact, as a kid, I was first introduced to transfer practice by a guy named Dale Douglas back in the day. He lived in Colorado, of all places.
Dale Douglas. Do you remember him having a caddy named Tony?
Yeah. I met his caddy. I don't know if it was Tony at the time. I was probably 14 when I was shagging balls for him, but he would take me out on the golf course, and I always would go get a score. At least the first time I went and got a scorecard, and his comment to me was, "Why are you getting a scorecard? We're going to go out and practice." And I said, "Well, why don't you keep score?" he laughed. He says, "Because I do it for a living." I said, "Okay, never mind." And it was my first introduction to transfer practice, and he went out on the golf course and hit balls and shaped shots and worked on things. And I grew up at a facility where if you went out on the golf course, you took a scorecard because you had to post a score, and that's maybe not the best thing for our students.
Eric, can you tell us a little bit about transfer practice and the deck of cards that you guys use? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, our goal with our students was to give them tools that would help them practice on the range and be more effective. Here's what it breaks down to. 50% of our students practice, 50% don't. When we follow up with questions on a questionnaire, and we say, "Are you willing to practice?" 97% of them say that they would practice. And then the next question is, "Well, why don't you?" And the answer is, "I don't know how." And so if we're going to be working on their technique, that's fine. Anybody can go to the range and work on their technique. Do ABC, and here's a drill for you. Here's a training aid. Go practice and work on the technique. But you've got to practice in a way that carries it to the golf course, and that's transfer practice. And so we decided to build or design some cards, a deck of cards that they could basically pull a card out of the deck and be challenged by the game. And the idea is that you'd have 4 levels in this card, and you would test yourself the first time and say you reach a level 2. Well, your challenge then is to work on your technique enough and practice with the challenge and get to a level 3. And they're all transfer practice driven. So an easy example is, you got 5 shots in a row with a 6-iron towards a target. The beginner golfer has to hit all 5 in a row up in the air with equal distance towards the target. The elite player, the X-level player, the tour player would have to hit all 5 within 3 paces of the target at 100, whatever their distance is with a 6-iron. So it kind of goes, it goes in from a beginner level all the way to a tour level player.
So I'm just surprised we don't see this deck of cards concept everywhere. I mean, I see so many people at the range every day, just it's motion without direction. There's nothing going on to get them better. A deck of cards concept would make so much more sense. How come we don't see more of it out there?
Well, and I'm gonna say something. I don't mean any offense to teaching professionals out there, but here's my explanation for it. When we have surveyed teachers around the country that have some years of experience teaching. Now they're not teaching 100 hours a week, but they teach lessons and they're active as a teacher at their facility. They are 75% predisposed to only offering skill practice recommendations. When we reach out to the top 100 teachers in the country, the folks that are the top 100 on the Golf Magazine list or whatever it might be, they are 50-50 split between skill practice and transfer practice. And the most common answer from those top teachers of why they blend skill and transfer practice is the most common response is, "I just learned through experience." And so experience teaches the instructor to offer more transfer practice environment. The less experienced teacher does not. They don't know that yet. And so I think a lot of it's just teaching experience, and we're predisposed to working strictly on the mechanics. So I think hopefully you'll see more of that transfer practice being suggested to the students of the instructors, but it's certainly out there for sure. That's a challenge to get people to do that. And I think even a golf magazine or a golf digest, they get so technical on things that it's hard not to be in skill practice the whole time you're trying to work on what you just read.
Yeah, I was brought up by an old timer. Of course, I'm an old timer now, but I mean, He used to take me out to play 9 holes almost every day, and he would say things like, I'd have a 30-foot putt or something. He'd say, "You want to make birdie here, but you want to make par even worse." And more on-course skills and thoughts than sitting there beating balls until your hands bleed. I mean, I believe you need to work a swing fault and beat it into submission, but you can do a lot of that in front of a mirror. You can do a lot of that in your backyard, and then when you get to the golf course, just drill, 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 and forget it.
I agree. I mean, the unique thing about golf is it's one of the few sports, I can't really think of another one, where the participant practices outside the field of play. So the driving range is by definition not the field of play. It's the driving range. And yet we practice on the driving range and then expect it to carry to the field of play, which is the golf course. And so I use this example sometimes with students. Imagine working on your basketball skills on a tennis court without a basketball hoop. I doubt you'd ever see a team doing that. Or vice versa, practicing your tennis skills on a basketball court without a net and a tennis ball and 2 rackets. And yet that's what we do in golf. We practice on the range, and then we never get out on the golf course. So it sounds like you had a really wise individual helping you with your golf game, because ideally you'd practice and play out on the golf course to prepare for tournaments and such.
Yeah, he also told me, he said, Lopez, the dumber they are, the better they play, and you're going to be a scratch golfer. He told me that when I was like 12. Crushed me, man. Now, what about rotation of skill sets? Meaning, how much time do you spend on short game, and how much time do you spend on your swing, and how much time do you spend on, do you?
Well, I think that's really the individual, based on the individual and what areas they need to work on. But this is what I tell students. I say, listen, sit down and kind of figure out the areas where you're losing strokes on the golf course on the performance side of it. If your goal is to go from shooting 90 to shooting 78, most likely it's a little bit of everything. If you shoot 100 and just want to break 90, well, maybe it is putting and chipping and putting, chipping, and pitching or something. But figure out what areas are going to be the most influential your performance, and work on those the most. Yet most of the people I meet they're 25 handicappers wanting to be 15 handicappers, and they stand on the range and work with their driver. All they do is hit driver, because if they hit it 20 yards further down the fairway, they're convinced that they're going to shoot better scores, which we will do this all the time in our golf school. If somebody says they need 20 yards to be a better golfer, we'll just add 20 yards to their tee shot and have them keep score for 9 holes. And typically they don't really lower their score but a stroke, because they miss the green with a 9-iron versus a 7-iron, and then they chip it over the green, then they chip it back up and then 3-putt, and then they'll say, yeah, but if I hit it further off the tee, I'd be better. Well, probably not, at least from a scoring standpoint. So that'd be first off. I'm getting long-winded on that idea, but work on the areas that are going to be the most beneficial to your goals. But then also too, research would show that you probably, in full swing, you probably don't need to hit more than 60 golf balls before you get a little sloppy with your technique anyway. So why would you stand there and hit 500 balls like we did as kids? I was the generation that was told, hit 500 balls a day, you'll be a good player. Well, after about 150, you pretty much zone out. You're not really paying attention, so why would you do that anyway? So 60 golf balls would be probably the max of full swing, and then make sure you're covering the areas that are going to be influential in your score. Your chipping, your pitching, your bunker play, your putting, whatever it might be.
Yeah, Chick Harbert was the one that told me that. He said, I used to take lessons from him for a while, and he says, you can't hit more balls than you can maintain your concentration.
Yeah, I mean, research shows that if you're an adult, probably you can maintain your focus for maybe an hour if you're disciplined.
I got about 5 minutes.
I was thinking you're like 3 to 4, but I'm not sure.
Give me 5 minutes and that's it.
But as far as again, it's one of those things where you probably are going to be, from a physical standpoint, you're not going to be able to control the club as well on the 60th ball as you would on the 10th ball. So if you're getting sloppy after 60 golf balls, why would you practice anyway? I mean, this is the discipline of golf is not like football, where when we were fatigued in football or basketball or baseball, that's when the coach had you run laps to create endurance. Well, that's not golf. That's not what you're trying to do. And so it's one of those things where it's just the approach that we take very often is counter to what we probably need to be doing. We don't practice in the field of play, and you got to get out there and practice in the field of play. So back to your question, rotation of the skill sets. I would be looking at the areas that need the most work or that can be the most influential to your performance. I would certainly be practicing some technique in full swing, because most everybody needs to be working on their technique to some degree. But then also too, shifting into transfer practice as much as I can to make sure I can carry those changes or those technique skills that I've been working on out to the golf course.
How much do you think about tempo when you play?
Personally, for me, a little bit, a fair amount, I guess. That's probably any more the focus for me would be on tempo or rhythm, I suppose, just because I don't necessarily work on a lot of stuff in my swing anymore because I don't play competitively. I just go out and have a good time. So for me, I'm not sitting there thinking, okay, I've got to get the club one more degree coming from the inside on the downswing path and change the bottom of the swing 3 inches, or I don't get into that technique stuff for my own game. So for me personally, I spend a lot of time working on that just to have a good rhythm, because if I have a good rhythm, I hit it pretty good. Now, a lot of the students I work with, rhythm isn't necessarily something that they need to work on because their technique is off. Their path is too much out to end, the face is too open, and necessarily changing the rhythm doesn't necessarily change that issue at impact.
Yeah, but do you think that, sometimes I think that the right speed for a given golfer, if he can find his right rhythm, that sometimes it can overcome a lot of problems in the swing, because the rhythm will get the club face back to square, like it, for that person, where they start swinging a little quicker than they should, and the wheels come off the wagon.
Yeah, I agree. I guess probably my take on that is that I'm going to try to fix the issue at hand, the most important issue, whether it's face or path or bottom of the swing or whatever it might be. If I can fix that, even if the rhythm gets a little bit off, they still would have a reasonable miss. So I'm just taking a different tack of it, but also I teach golf schools where people come to work on their technique, so I have to fix the technique.
If anybody wants to ask a question, we got this chat box here. You can go ahead and pop your question. Belmont just sent something here. What are the 3 by Eric? What do you mean, what are the 3? You have to understand, Paul's probably been drinking again. That's the problem. So
we've already answered that.
Question for Eric, Bobby, since
go ahead.
Since we have him, and Eric's been at Pinehurst forever. What comes to mind is Payne Stewart's win there. It's such a such a big win, and Payne Stewart's plan that he had when he played that week. Do you have any thoughts on his plan that he had there, Eric?
As far as with Payne in the '99 Open, well, I guess probably in talking with he and Dr. Coop, some of the stuff that they were working on. I might be talking about something else than you guys are talking about.
No, you're absolutely, yeah, that's it.
I mean, as far as he had, his go-to plan was to have areas that he would avoid around the green.
Exactly. Yep. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a great strategy for playing a golf course. Where can't you go, and what do I do to avoid that? And it might be, I mean, you've heard tour players talking about this forever. They might stand in the middle of a fairway and realize that if they go long, that's a better miss than if they're short left or short right or whatever it might be. So he basically had areas that were red zones where he was trying to avoid hitting the ball there, only because he wouldn't have a chance getting up and down. Now, number 2 is a great example of that, because there's some really challenging areas that no matter where the pin is, if you're left of the green or short, let's say, of the first hole, short left of the green, on the first hole of number 2, it doesn't matter where the pin is. You've got a very challenging up and down shot. whether you chip it or pitch it or putt it or whatever you're going to do. It's no matter where the pin is, it's going to be very challenging. Where if you were to go slightly long right, you might have an easier chance of getting up and down, again, if the pin is either the front, middle, or the back. So he basically strategized that he had areas where he was not going to miss the golf ball, and it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, pretty good.
I just heard back from Derek, and Derek says, I've been listening for 15 minutes. You guys are too smart for me. He said, I don't think of all that poop.
I don't think he's been listening. But,
That's right.
Very interesting. I love this.
I've been listening.
There he is. Derek.
I have been listening, and I've heard a lot of great comments. I have heard things that I don't think about when I play, or when my player does not think of. I don't think.
What's that?
But I do remember you mentioning
Me?
something
No.
you guys said about Nick Faldo at
Had a shake.
Right.
I watched Bernhard Langer on the range before he warms up, and I have watched him go through every single hole in his routine.
Who's this?
Bernhard.
Bernhard Langer.
Bernhard, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, he's meticulous.
He goes through every round before he tees off. And then players that I've caddied for will play the first three holes, especially the first tee shot that they have to hit. And then they'll think in the back of their mind, okay, what tee shot that I am not 100% comfortable with? So I'm going to say number 9 at Boca Raton, water left, out of bounds right, and 2 bunkers on the right side that if it's downwind, I might hit 3-wood. If it's into the wind, I'm hitting driver. And if I hit driver, I know I can't carry the right bunkers, so the water's in play on the left side. So that's their whole scenario. And I've had the player ask me, what's the wind doing on number 9? I said, it's down right to left. And I'll see him, and he'll hit a few 3-woods. So, I mean, they do go around and pick out certain holes that they're not comfortable on. So what I've listened to, I thought was great. Eric, you've had some great, I love the card issue. I've never heard of that in my 24 years of teaching and being a director of golf. I thought that was great, and I'd love to know more about that if we ever have time.
No problem. We've had great success with it. You know, it's funny. I really appreciate your comments. It's interesting to hear what the tour players are doing for sure. And yeah, but that by definition is transfer practice. And so many of the amateurs I work with just don't ever get past the takeaway. You know, where are my shoulders and what's the club face at impact, and they never get to the point of doing transfer practice. And the trouble is, it's hard as heck to carry skill practice out to the golf course, and so they always.
Uh-oh, somebody's making noise in the background here.
There we go.
Yeah, I played golf yesterday and today, and of course here in North Carolina, I mean, it was 38 degrees when we teed off, and there was no skill practice, and there was no transfer practice. It was just trying to find something to hit the ball solid to get through the day
and not hurt your.
It was interesting because there was no overswinging because you had so many clothes on. Your hands were halfway numb, and you made sure there was no extra. You talked. I think Bobby, you mentioned something about talking about your timing or tempo. I think your tempo, if the longer you go in 1, 2, 3, and 4 holes, your timing's usually pretty good. And the longer you go in the round, you find yourself getting more loose. Your swing speeds up because now you think you can hit it a little bit farther. I think that's where in your back of your mind, you've got to say, okay, if I can't hold my finish with my tee shot or with my irons into the green, then I'm probably swinging a little bit too quick. So that would be something, if somebody else is listening, what I usually tell my students, or when I look for in my player, okay, is he starting to get a little quick at the top in the transition because he can't hold his finish? that make sense, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's everybody has to find their swing cues that they can perform out on the golf course for sure. But you got to practice that on the range at some point, most likely.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Yes.
I think when you get in the right rhythm, you know it's time to press.
And I'm gonna act stupid. Y'all go ahead. I'm gonna start listening again.
You're too down with pressing. And when you don't have your rhythm right, I'm gonna stay away from the press. I just I play by feel. When I feel right, I play good. When I don't feel right, I don't play good. And it was cold, like Derek was saying. I find my biggest problem is putting. When your hands are cold like that and you have to putt, I don't have the same feel.
But today was the guys who played in the pro down here today. They had a miserable day for sure. But they played some good golf too. There's some good scores.
Yeah, we shot 10 under today, Eric.
Wow.
At Mid-South.
That's 10 under. What course you guys play?
We played over at Mid-South, so that was the scramble. Yesterday was the best ball where we got really cold. We bogeyed the last 2 holes, and we shot 2 under yesterday.
Yeah. So
we're at 12 under with one round to go.
It's good. That's great. That's great golf today. I think I looked at my watch at around 11:45 or 12. I think it was 44 degrees with a feels like temperature of 37. So it was pretty miserable for sure.
I have a 50-degree rule. If it's below 50, I do not play. Unfortunately, it was a tournament I had to play.
Well, you were 10 under. How many players did you have? 12?
Just a 2-man scramble.
Oh, just a two-man scramble? You guys were 10 under?
Yeah, it's pretty good golf.
Sometimes a hole gets in the way.
Unbelievable. That's kick tail, man.
I had a good partner.
I'm glad I didn't play with you guys. I'd have lost my shirt.
But going through, like, I'd love to come talk to you, Eric. And live only 10 minutes away from you. But I'd love to come by and talk to you about some of the your thoughts and your experience of teaching, because I think it's very, very. I learned a lot already listening to you guys talk tonight in the 15 minutes that I've listened, and I'd love to listen some more. So I'm gonna be quiet and just let y'all go.
No problem. Good talk. Play well tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, Derek's a great guy, and of course he was caddying for Gene when he won the U.S. Senior Open, and that's where we all met. We were all working together as a team, and I tell you, it's a pleasure to be around Derek. I'm telling you, and Gene. It was such an honor for me. I mean, it was just a lucky break. Any questions for Eric? Anybody got a question? Let me see. I had Paul's microphone open a second. He had a question. Where did Paul go? There he is. Hey, Belmont. Is your microphone working? No? Oh, well.
Yes, here it is.
There you go. What's your question, partner?
Can you go over schedule and agenda real quick again? I kind of missed that.
So did I. I just put it up there, man. I don't know. I had to think of something.
Oh, okay.
Well, what we're saying, Eric, what I was thinking is to say, okay, how does someone really schedule their practice? So they say, okay, I'm going to practice 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 4 days a week. And when I do, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on that. Do you give people a certain schedule to follow to say this is what you need to do and when?
I try to. I think that's probably the most challenging thing as an instructor for me is to come up with a schedule that's going to be productive, help them be productive with their time. So here's a couple rules I go by in my mind, at least when I'm trying to design a schedule for somebody. First off, how many days can they practice a week? I mean, obviously, the more days they can practice, the better off they are. It doesn't have to be 2-hour sessions. If they just have 45 minutes, that's better to do that 3 or 4 times a week or 2 times a week versus saving all your practice time for a Saturday. I mean, research shows that. So
right.
get out there. It's not really a time. It's not the quantity. It's the quality of it. So that's number one. Number two would be that, again, you try to figure out what's the most influential area to their performance. And so that could be, with some people, it really could be hitting full shots. With other people, it might be working on chipping and putting. So that you try to figure out what's going to be the easiest thing to work on that can influence their performance. And again, depends on the person. So let's say it's a little bit, let's say I'll give you an example of a guy I'm going to give a lesson to tomorrow. He has some technique issues. When we first met, he swings a little bit over the top, the face gets a little open, kind of the usual thing. So we've got some things that he's working on technique-wise that help his path through impact. He's doing better with that, so now it's time to shift into some other areas that can influence his performance. So I'm planning tomorrow to look at his putting and his chipping, because his golf swing's getting better overall. He's hitting it a little bit straighter. He's hitting a fairway or two more, a green or two more per round. So let's not put all of our attention on that. Let's work on some areas that can maybe help him with scoring. And my sense of his chipping and putting is that his chipping is pretty good, but his 6-foot putts and in or 5-foot putts and in aren't very good. So we're going to probably be taking a look at his technique and maybe his green reading skills and determining are those things that could be beneficial to his scoring. So that's just an example right there. So I'll assign him a couple of things to do in his full swing, but then I'll give him some practice routines for his putting and his green reading. And one of the things I'll have him do is actually go work on his green reading out on the golf course, where he maybe only putts a couple of putts on a specific green, but he gives himself a certain putt, works on the green reading aspect of it, figures out what he's missing with the green reading, the initial green reading process, and then adapt to it, learn from it, and move on to the next green. Most of our students, when we studied looking at green reading, most amateur golfers, when we did a fairly extensive study on this, we had, of the 2,000 putts we measured of where they would aim to compensate for the break, of the 2,000 plus putts, there was not a single one that was an overread break. And the average was they would underread the putts by an average of 60%. So if they had a 3-foot putt, they were only seeing a foot of the putt, the break, versus 3 feet of the break.
That makes sense.
Pretty substantial. Actually, funny enough, the person that was the most effective green reader was actually the highest female handicapper we had in the study, and she just doubled everything she saw, because she figured out through trial and error that if she just doubled the break she saw, she was better off. So she had her own little routine of fixing it. But so anyway, I'm going to spend time with him on green reading tomorrow, making sure he's okay with that. And again, so now the practice session or the practice sessions are designed to accommodate those topics.
All right, we've got another question here. That's a good one here. Let me see. I agree with you 1,000%. Darren, tell them about that apparatus you just had me buy.
Oh, you mean the blast unit?
Yeah, the blast thing. Do you use that, Eric?
A couple of teachers that work for us have been utilizing that and just kind of experimenting with it. So I have not spent much time with it other than the initial pitch from the sales guys just to see it. We've been working with it here now since probably the spring. A couple of our guys have been pretty extensive with it, trying to figure out the benefits of it. I think so far the feedback has been pretty positive. They like it.
The blast unit is fantastic. But as you're saying, Eric, the read of the green has got to be there first, because if you're not reading the green properly, you're not controlling your energy the right way. So, that's where the blast unit comes into play. The first thing is reading the green properly, and then you can start to control your energy properly. So,
Derek does that aim point thing, which you know a lot about, don't you?
That's what I'm saying. Derek and I are both doing or proponents of aim point, but if you're not reading the green properly, your energy control is awful.
Oh, I agree. In fact, quick little story that would highlight that. We had this study I'm talking about. We had 18 putts that people read. 9 putts were left to right. 9 putts were right to left. And for every putt that was right to left of a certain amount of break, whether it was a foot to 3 feet or 4 feet of break, we had a mirroring one from the other direction. We had a guy that was reading a putt, and it was one of the putts that broke 18 inches right to left. And he's telling me that he's going to aim left edge for it because he didn't see any of the break at all. And once we got done with the study, I had him go back and try a couple of putts for me because I was interested to see what would he do to accommodate a putt that breaks 18 inches right to left, and he's seeing it left edge. So the first putt he did, he pulled it, of course, in his mind. He hit it about 2 feet left of the hole, 18 inches left of the hole. And he said to me, so I pulled that putt. I said, we'll do one more. And he putted the next one, but he opened the face so much at impact to offset the left, the break of right to left, that he lifted out, and he said to me that was a better putt. And so here I am as an instructor watching a guy change his putting stroke to accommodate his read. And that, for me, was a kind of one of those light bulb moments where you're thinking, all I'm worried about is the stroke, and the guy can't read the green to where he's not going to put a good stroke on it anyway. Yep. So yeah, I agree with you. Your focus has to be on the green read first off, and then you can go from there.
What do you think of, got a question here, what's your view on this online training, of which we're guilty as charged? We do a lot of it ourselves here, where people will send us in a video, we look at the video, we do an analysis, we send it back, and we attach a drill to it. What do you think of that? It says versus traditional in-person training.
Well, it's a good question. I think that's the direction that instruction's going in, so I'm okay with it. I'm old school enough to where I think the one-on-one is really great because you develop the personal relationships, and I don't know if that would necessarily happen with an online type of environment. But having said that, I received a note from a guy in our golf school this past fall today, sent him a couple of things to work on that were just follow-ups to what we worked on when he was here, and he just sent me a note later on today, just this evening, said it really helped and he appreciated me taking a look at his video. So I think there's a great tool there. I guess probably the question would be, because you're not with the person in one-on-one, are you making the best choice for them drill-wise or technique changes-wise, because you're not getting the assessment of their movement patterns, their physical fitness level, the personal stuff that you might derive from this conversation with them. But it's certainly in the direction that a lot of things are going in.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, it is somewhat limited in scope. There's nothing better than being one-on-one, no doubt about it. But in a lot of cases, there's so much misinformation out there that even somebody that sends us and of course I'm tooting our own horn here, but sends us a video from Seattle and says, hey, can you help me? We can do better sometimes online than what some other person there locally is doing, giving misinformation.
Oh, I agree. I would say any more in the age we're in with the volume of information available, a lot of the students I meet are misinformed, not because it's bad information, but it's information that doesn't fit them.
Right.
So when we've looked at the methodologies of instructors out in the world of golf, there's probably 5 or 6 methodologies that everybody would fit into to some degree. Common themes are in each of these areas. And so it's really more, it's not all that crazy what people are talking about, but for the student, they've got to pick and choose the methodology that fits them. And sometimes they're not able to distinguish that one methodology, again, might work perfect for somebody, but it might not fit them as well as another methodology. They struggle with that. So certainly helping them navigate that, I think, is very valuable. And I get a lot of videos from students that have come to our golf school. I see them once a year, and yet I might get 3 or 4 videos over the course of the year where I just get a chance to chart their progress and offer insight into it. So I think it's the direction instruction's going in. It already is there. I guess the question is, when you're describing a drill, when you're offering a drill or a practice routine or a swing cue, the challenge is going to be, how do you make it How do you know for sure if it fits the student because you're not getting the feedback of watching the ball flight and interacting with them? And I think kind of a thing that I challenge students with is that they might send me a video, or I might be sitting with them watching the video of their swing, and I ask them, what do you think? What do you want to work on? What would make sense to you that could be beneficial to you? And it's really pretty interesting how often they are very correct with their own diagnosis. They just don't think of it that. They don't give themselves the opportunity to participate in that process. We did a study not too long ago where we had 3 groups of golfers. One group was a very specific internal swing cue I gave them. Another group was an external swing cue I gave them. And then the third group, they actually decided what swing cue they would give themselves, whether it was an internal or external, and to work on their technique issue. And surprisingly enough, they did really well with making the right choice and picking something that would be beneficial to them to work on in the process. So for me, again, it was one of those moments where, why am I not getting the feedback? And I guess the only challenge of the videos online is, are you able to get that feedback from them?
Eric, we really appreciate your time. Tell us a little bit about how some of your programs work, how some of our listeners can get in touch with you, and then we want to have you to Myrtle Beach. Can we have you to Myrtle Beach for a little bit?
I can make it to Myrtle Beach. It's not that far.
There we go. Tell us how people can get in touch with you and some of your programs.
Oh, sure. Well, we've got the website and all that stuff. Pinehurstresort.com. You can just click on that if you want to take a look at the Golf Academy. We have just finished up our programs for the season, so we are at this stage getting everything organized for 2019 with the various schools, the dates and all that stuff, rates and all that stuff that we'll be putting together. So that'll be ready to go here in a couple of days. So from there, if they want to reach out to me and talk about anything or follow up with some questions, they can just type in. We'll just reach out through the Golf Academy.
Pinehurst.com.
Yeah, Pinehurst.com. And if you wanted to send me an email, you can just. Oh, so that's a picture of me with my beard. Sorry about that.
What's wrong with that?
It's just my
There's
wife.
the deck of cards. There's the deck of cards. Go back to the cards.
There's a deck of cards.
He looks like Jesus and probably putts like Mary.
Yeah, Paul Belmont asked her, he said, what's energy control? I said, Paul, you know, your wife was telling me you had that problem.
My wife looked at me that morning and said, you look disheveled. I said, that's not what I'm going for. So I cut it off the next day, but too late for the clip. But the
beautiful facility.
Yeah, we have a great facility. We get a lot of support from the folks who run the operation, and they can send an email to me. If you want to reach out to me directly, it's eric.alpenfels@pinehurst.com, or you can send me a note via the Golf Academy. Sue Jett is our coordinator. She'll get me the email real quick. So
nice place to stay and play.
Not a bad place to stay and play.
No doubt about it. All right, well, Eric, you're the man. You would really, I mean, everything Darren said about you was true.
Well, thanks, Bobby. Appreciate that. And everything he said about you was true as well.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, you should be very afraid of that. For sure.
All right, I hope everybody enjoyed it. And we'll send you the link and send you a copy of it so that you'll have it, Eric, so you can say, I suffered through this. And I survived.
Just don't share it with Michael Breed.
I'll never do that. All right. Take care, guys. Appreciate it.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks. Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Hey, Darren, you still